Mysterious. This guy shot Bigfoot. Well, hey y'all, welcome back to Cryptid Mysterious. Got a great little story for everybody today. Let's jump right into it. This one comes to us from Aaron out of Pennsylvania. Smack that like button for me and let's do it. In 1973, I was living with my new bride Tessa in the western region of Pennsylvania. At that time, there was a long-standing debate going on within the state between those who do and those who don't. Please allow me to explain. At that time, we had a fairly robust black bear population in the state, with the do's being those who were in favor of more black bears, such as hunters and tourists, and the don'ts being farmers and beekeepers, such as myself, along with a whole host of other agricultural-related businesses. Black bears can be extremely destructive creatures, and as you can imagine, bears have an insatiable hankering for honey. Perhaps you may recall the story of Winnie the Pooh and his liking for honey, the author apparently having a certain knowledge pertaining to the habits of bears prior to writing the book. Beekeeping was not all that I did, but it had grown from a hobby into producing about 20% of my income at the time, and I wasn't too keen on having anyone or anything louse that up. I had been living in this house for 3 years when my wife had been with me for the last 2. That led up to the event of which I'm about to tell you. Although I just told you that bears are a problem for the honey industry, I hadn't personally had a problem with them, but I knew others within the state who had, through our organizational newsletters. It was well known in our town that an occasional bear was shot and buried in the ditch to protect one's hives from destruction. In our neck of the woods, it was not uncommon to hear a gunshot ring out at any particular time of the year, and nobody was particularly running to find out where it had come from. It was 1973 that I went out to the hives early one morning to begin a clean out. I had suited myself up and got my smoke pot going. I had 8 large hives located in 3 different areas of the field behind my house. My new bride was already getting her feet wet, helping me with the bees. Behind my house was what my wife called the dollhouse, which was a shed that I built to look kind of like our house. It was the same color and had the same green roof shingles. It had a couple of double-hung windows as well. In reality, it was the shop I used to extract honey from the combs, and had taken the time to make it look like something other than a shed. Having taken the combs from the first 2 sets, my wife was already hard at work in the dollhouse, so I went out into the far end of the field to tend to the rest of the hives. As I was approaching the last set out in the field, I could see that there were bees flying everywhere, and that the tops had been removed from the hives. As I got nearer, most of the combs were scattered around on the ground. Upon closer inspection, they and the hives themselves had been badly damaged. Of course, my initial thoughts were that now I was the one with the bear problem, and I was going to have to do something about it. I spent the rest of the morning repairing the hives, after which I focused my energy on the solution. For whatever reason, my thoughts were that the bear would come back to the same hives, having been repaired, so I lashed a ladder to the side of a large maple near the hives. nailed some 2x12s in the crotch of the tree as a place to sit and wait for the culprit to return. That night, I took my double-barrel 12 loaded with buckshot, sat in the tree the entire night with nothing coming of it. After talking it over with my wife, I decided to wait a few days and have a go at it again. 4 days later, I once again climbed up into the tree to lay wait for the honey snatcher's return. I had climbed up into the tree at 10 p.m., bringing with me my shotgun and a large flashlight with 4 D cells that I had taped to the underside of the gun's barrel. It wasn't like you had to aim this gun because at close range, it'd be more or less a point-blank shot scenario, and it was highly doubtful that I could or would miss anything at the distance I was sitting away from the hives. At 2 a.m. on the button, I heard some crunching on the edge of the woods, and I began seeing the silhouettes of something large and black coming into the field. Although I could see no details whatsoever because the flashlight was still off, it looked like the biggest bear in the state of Pennsylvania was now walking over to my hives. I waited until it was on top of them and removing the lid from one of the hives. That's when I threw the switch on the flashlight, illuminating it, and I pulled the trigger before it or I had a chance to think. It was only a split second after that shot had hit it that I realized it was not a bear, but a giant gorilla. It reeled backwards from the impact and fell to the ground. I had the light right on it, and it stood to its feet yet again. So frightened was I by the sight of this creature that without hesitation, I squeezed off a second round, hitting the beast squarely a second time. Again, the monster fell to the ground, and I broke the barrel frantically to load 2 more shells. With my adrenaline pumping, and in my haste to reload quickly, the heavy flashlight broke free from the tape as I snapped the barrel open. It fell to the ground below the tree, and the light went out. I was now sitting in the tree, alone, in the dark, with a gigantic, wounded beast no more than 20 yards away from me in the field. It took my eyes a little while to refocus without the aid of the light, and when they did, I couldn't see the gorilla anymore. It was gone. Now, there was no way I was climbing down out of this tree with no light and that beast walking around wounded, so I decided to stay in the tree. About 30 minutes later, I saw a light coming across the field of from my house, and I knew it was my wife. Of course, she had heard the shots and was expecting me to return, which I hadn't. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Go back in the house and lock the doors!" I saw the light turn around. I knew that she had heard what I said and was running back towards the house. What I didn't know was that she had called the police. About 15 minutes later, I could see flashing lights down by the house. Within moments, there were several men shouting and coming into the field with flashlights. I shouted to them, "I'm over here, in the large maple, be careful. There's a large wounded animal around here somewhere." With that, their pace slowed, and the lights were now moving everywhere in the field. By the time they got close to me, I was already coming down the ladder and beginning to tell them what happened. We all looked at the hive, and there was quite a bit of blood on the ground where the gorilla had fallen twice. We all walked back to the house with where my wife was waiting. We sat down in the kitchen where I had a lot of explaining to do. When I got around to telling every detail about this gorilla, you can just imagine the looks I was getting. One of the officers said, "It's against the law to hunt bears out of season. regardless of what they're doing to your hives. I tried to lighten things up by saying, "What about shooting a gorilla?" But they weren't smiling. In the morning, they had returned to scour the woods in hopes of finding what they believed was a bear. But nothing was found. They told me that if I was found in violation in the future, they would find me and confiscate my gun, and they left. After they were gone, my wife said to me, "Honey, did you really shoot a gorilla?" I told her that what I had seen was indescribable in a known human term. It was definitely not a man, but it was way too big to actually be a gorilla. And yet at the time, the description favored that of being a gorilla rather than being a man. When I had raised the barrels of my shotgun and flipped on the switch on the flashlight, there was approximately a 3-second delay before I squeezed the trigger. This was enough time for my mind to determine human or non-human, and then I fired a shot. When the light hit it, the eyes were glowing bright yellow, and the beast opened its mouth, exposing large white teeth. The top of its head was almost level with the boards I was sitting on, the height being close to 10 feet. It had to be all of 5 or 6 feet wide at the shoulders, and its musculature was beyond description. When I hit it with the first round, and that followed by the second, the beast didn't make so much as a sound. There was no scream or growl or anything. It was knocked down, but it got up, and it was knocked down again, and then it disappeared as I was reloading and dropped the light. I now know that what I shot was a Bigfoot. However, at the time, I had not personally heard of any of the then reported sightings and evidence that had been seen in the Pacific Northwest in regards to the Patterson-Gimlin film or the large footprints which were found on the job site. None of this was known to me at the time at all. After the creature was shot that night, there was no further damage done to the hives going forward. I never saw any further evidence of the Bigfoot's presence on our property, and my wife and I continued to live at that home for another 15 years after the events of that night. Well, that was a pretty cool one. What do y'all think of that? I mean, kind of feel bad for the big guy running off with a couple of rounds of buckshot. But, that's... I don't know, who do you feel worse for? I mean, the guy that shot it or the Bigfoot? Obviously, the Bigfoot's got the injury, but the guy that shot it has a whole new take on reality. Well, let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you got a Bigfoot encounter or know of a story or had anything mysterious happen to you at some point in life, I would love to hear about it. Shoot me an email at cryptidmysterious@gmail.com, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Appreciate y'all.